It's the only high-rise in Santa Barbara.
There's something that's so prominent that really grabs your attention. Everyone knows the Granada building.
Even talking to people on the street, they all think of this as a very special place, important to the community, and they have great memories.
100 years is pretty amazing.
Thank God for the people that came forward to keep it alive.
Theater and performing arts and music are so important now.
Everybody's proud of it. It's like, wow, this is something Santa Barbara has special. And people come from out of town and they see it and they go, that looks like a theater as beautiful as one of the ones in Europe.
My grandmother would send wonderful letters about what was going on in Santa Barbara at the Granada Theatre. And she would tell about all the movie stars that were here and the opening nights. And as a little girl in Texas, it was very exciting for me.
You know, with this huge stage here, we can do Broadway shows. And so we do probably have the most variety of any theater in town.
We love coming to the Granada Theatre for concerts, symphony, ballet, movies even, and everybody knows somebody locally who belongs to a local dance group or a symphony. So it's really more than a place for performers to shine, but it's also a place to bring the community together.
Well, I think it's an exciting space and it's alive. Every time I've been in here for any kind of performance, the acoustics, the lighting, you know, it's great when you work on a building and it comes out the way you would hope it would come out.
I have twins, and when they were 8 years old, I brought them here. And it was amazing thinking that this was their first concert and it was in a place like this.
The community has this jewel that they can share with their future generations to come. And it's exciting to bring our kids to the theater and see the shows with them.
Once they step into the building, they just kind of go, oh, it's amazing. I never would have known looking at it from the street.
I love this theater. It's definitely a central part of this community, and it has stories to tell that I think we need to listen to.
What's been fascinating in this whole process of getting ready for the centennial year is how much community involvement has been part of the Granada story from the very beginning.
The California Theatre Company built this theater along with several other theaters in the 1920s, and they are among a group of companies across the country that were building sort of small circuits where they could dominate a town like this.
The original company that decided to build it thought that it would draw businesses to Santa Barbara, would draw tourists to Santa Barbara, and it would be a place for the community to congregate.
Part of the original fundraising behind the building of the building in 1924 was actually selling shares.
The architects who did the restoration have shared the original blueprints. And in the course of looking up the history, finding the granddaughters of the original builder.
Charles Urton is such a character in the whole story. The idea that he wrote away for books how to build a high-rise.
My mother was Ruth Margaret Urton, and I'm the third one. No.
I think you're fourth.
But our mother, we were lambasted with the history of Charles Urton.
People mention Santa Barbara a lot, and I say, oh, have you been to State Street? Do you know where the Granada Theatre is?
When I'd come here with friends or boyfriends, and I'd say, oh, there's my grandfather on that mosaic. How interesting, and they'd all be very impressed.
It's not always easy to work into a conversation, but I usually manage.
I mean, when you get a contract to build a building like this and you've never done steel reinforced concrete, and you send away for how-to-do books, that tells you the kind of person he was.
How to build a skyscraper.
In 1924, going to the movies was not just about going to the movie. It was about going to see a show. That meant a live stage show, an orchestra. So this theater opened with Mademoiselle Midnight starring Mae Murray. It was open with 25-piece orchestra as well as the Kosloff Ballet. And there was a Wurlitzer here. So yeah, it was a gala event which had all of the trappings of a major civic moment. When you opened the theater back then, the opening programs were not just a testament to the films that would be shown there, the technology. They were also about who laid the plaster, what upholstery they used, what seats were used, what companies built those theaters, who were the insurance carriers. It was really an activity that was celebrated.
That a year after it was built, the earthquake flattened most of the surrounding buildings.
Everything pretty much was demolished in that earthquake. I don't know what it was on the Richter scale. But the Granada Theatre did not have a crack.
It's one of the few buildings that withstood the earthquake.
They remember the police and firemen yelling at Grandpa Charlie to come down.
Because it was not safe. He said it's definitely safe. I built it.
When he said, "Come up and get me," to the policeman, my mother was very deeply embarrassed.
He went to the top with a sign that said, "Built by Charles Urton," and his phone number.
In the 20s, people didn't always think about going to the movies as a place to see film. Live performance as well as music was very much a part of the movie-going experience here at the Granada.
We found photos, we found documents, we found old programs.
All of that live entertainment that people have become accustomed to between 24 and 28 was suddenly shifting. In 1928, this theater installed both Vitaphone and Movietone. And those were two processes that were run primarily by Warner Brothers and Fox. And then this was an independent theater. It could contract with both of those technologies.
This is the form of record that is employed. I will ask the operator now to start the rest of the recording machinery.
Now those films were coming already from the studios with a baked-in soundtrack, and so essentially you were coming to see a film here the way you would see it across the country because everyone was now hearing the same music and same dialogue. In 1926, the Granada also experimented with Technicolor in a way in which you can get color and not just black and white into your films.
I think it was called the Warner Theater at one point because Warner Brothers had a large sign on the front of the theater.
In 1930, Warner Brothers saw California Theater's position, and Warner Brothers bought 4 of those theaters. They bought the California, the Mission, and the Rose, along with the Granada, establishing them within the Warner Brothers design aesthetic. They also brought in a technology called Magnoscope to create a screen that was upwards of 4 times as large. And in 1942, the original marquee was torn off the building, and there was an effort to donate it to the war effort, and no one wanted it. So this beautiful marquee was sent to the Santa Barbara City Junkyard for a total of $20. It's interesting that during the war effort, the new marquee came in, but the marquee looked more sleek. It was a bit more modern, but it was also really to attract your eye no matter what angle you were coming from. We had reached a box office crescendo in '48. Movie studios are looking for something that will bring people back to the movies. 3D. People thought if you could create a new third dimension in movie-going, that would be different than what you can get in TV. Moana Devil showed here, and then Warner Brothers' House of Wax premiered here right after. CinemaScope, the anamorphic process that expanded the screen, enabled the Granada to take advantage of all of the widescreen films that were being made in the 1950s and then into the 1960s.
Movies that became prominent would open here That gave it a reputation, I'm sure, a well-deserved one.
And they had dozens of sneak previews in this theater.
If you go back to the 1930s, and really for half a century, there is an endless parade of previews here at the Granada. Unfortunately, we don't know what films were previewed here because it was shrouded in secrecy, but a lot of decisions were made about what should happen to those films before they're released. And it really gives you a sense of the importance of this theater beyond what showed here. It was the idea that Santa Barbara was being used as a test site for audience reaction. So of how to connect people to this theater as a community center. You might give sweaters to a bunch of students that say only angels have wings. There was also display windows. There's a film starring Errol Flynn that had Stagecoach on the street. There were other kind of parades as well as contests across town. A good example of that was the film Test Pilot with a model airplane contest. And again, it was all an effort to bring attention to not only this theater, but to the films that it showed. Part of the legacy of the Granada, you see that already from 1924, the way that the acoustics of this theater always lent itself to live performances, community gatherings, one-night-onlys, concert events that are happening here, as well as stage shows, charity performances.
Martha Graham, who was coming here and dancing.
It always was a theater that did many, many kinds of things.
Even during the Warner Brothers years, the New York Philharmonic, the LA Philharmonic were a central part of what kind of entertainment was happening at the Granada.
My mom brought me. We came in for the symphony, and I was just a teenager. And I can remember walking in over on this side, getting onto a seat, and listening to the music up there. And my memory will never just get rid of that.
Whenever they had a program that needed a piano, and they'd rent the Steinway from Bennett's, then I came with the piano.
And so the Granada has always been about not just film, but the performing arts. In late 1954, Metropolitan Theaters out of Los Angeles begins negotiating with Stanley Warner to buy a couple of its other theaters, and then by the beginning of 1955, it acquires this theater as well.
If you were interested in going to a movie in Santa Barbara, they had all the theaters in town.
Seen movies here going up to the balcony, and of course in those days there were double features.
My first time that my parents let me come by myself with a bunch of my friends, fantastic voyage that we saw in 1966.
This became a key 70mm house, not just in Santa Barbara, but really for Southern and Central California. Star Wars ran here for 14 weeks before another run of Close Encounters.
A couple of kids from the Midwest. Close Encounters, Christmas Day in 1977.
We bought it from Metropolitan, and they leased it back for 25 years. One of the more interesting things, it was used during the war as an air raid shelter. Storage of barrels of water and stuff from the 40s, obviously, to the 70s.
I remember when they made it into 3. I think it was 3 that they did, and it was 2 of them upstairs, and then the one big one down here.
They made the balcony into 2 separate screens.
Had the opportunity to see the movies at both levels and always wondered why somebody would do and destroy this theater that badly.
Well, I don't know the economics of it, but it was not a pretty thing to do.
They had a wall going up all the way to the ceiling, so the disc that you see, the chandelier that you see in the middle was divided in half with that wall, so that was pretty brutal. But I still remember seeing the side wings where the boxes are right now. They were still pretty intact, so you can see some of the molding. So there was a lot of it that was missing, but it was still very beautiful to see what the theater was. Like, you can imagine what it could have been.
All the major orchestras of the world came here, and we had a very fine local symphony orchestra. And it was time for Santa Barbara to have a really good place. And I met Susan at a party.
We happened to be talking with the mayor, Harriet Miller, and the 3 of us started talking about we need a performance theater.
That's how it started, was everybody felt the need for a new performing arts center for Santa Barbara.
And to have landed on this building and to have preserved it, I think is such a gift to the city.
There were times where we got so discouraged because people said, it can't be downtown. It has to be at this place or that place. And I think deep down we knew that Santa Barbara wanted it to be downtown. One day, all of a sudden, it became apparent that the Granada was the right place. And fortunately, we knew that Maury Jerkowitz owned the building, and he would help us.
No, let's do it. Let's just have patience. It'll come about.
So what do you do with it? It has the potential, but only if people stood up and made commitments to it.
The Granada was in horrible condition, horrible. The whole place was a big mess.
And there are a lot of people in town that said there's no way you're going to raise enough money to restore that old dilapidated theater.
We thought we would just clean things up and put things together. And boy, they all realized we needed to really redo a lot of this theater.
Michael Tobes joined us. We took him out for lunch and we said, wouldn't you like to help us? And he said, sure.
The Granada held Michael's heart. This was the favorite project he did. For years, this was his focus. He gave Susan Gilbranson and Joan Rutkowski a lot of credit. They were the visionaries, and Michael came along and helped it to happen. He's still involved, from the best seat in the house.
Santa Barbara Civic Light Opera, which was the precursor to the Performing Arts Center, was operating out of here.
I think it's amazing that the CLO could still use it. We said to save the CLO on their campaign, and so we wrote a check. It wasn't more than maybe a week later, I got a phone call. They said, would you like to sit in the board of directors? In time, I realized how dilapidated it was, and I realized the balcony was condemned and closed. But at the time, it was magical.
I think once you came in the theater, you couldn't help but fall in love with it, even though it wasn't in the kind of condition you see today. But all the basics were here.
We bought it in 1977 and owned it until 2000 when we sold it to Rossi.
My mother got me into theater, and I'm sure she's the culprit for all of this interest, but I'm an architect and I like historical buildings.
We didn't knock it down, and we didn't sell it to someone that knocked it down. So that was a good thing.
Originally, we hoped to allow the light opera to continue and to incorporate music performance. The person that approached me was Mike Tobes.
He had lunch with Rob Rossi and came up with the vision that he and Susan and Joan had. And I understand that Rob was persuaded and gave up the plans he had with other people.
And he said, Rob, would you consider dividing the building and letting it become the Performing Arts Center? I said, yeah, I'll do that.
So that the theater itself became a separate property from the tower.
And he resold the theater to the Performing Arts Center.
Our first goal was to raise $13 million. Yes. There were a lot of people, but those were like people that were so known in the community. I said, if they're going to be behind this, this is going to take off.
In 2003 is when I got involved in the project as the project manager, working with Roger Phillips and Steve Match from my office. They were the principal architects. It was great working on this project. I think it's the highlight of my career and will be the highlight of my career.
It was a collaborative process. We all met at least once or twice a week down here for 3 years, and then through the whole construction process.
I don't know how many people realize, but we had about 130 sketches of each and every element in this design.
It's clear that this building had good structure, had good bones, as they say.
My role during the renovation was the archaeologist. So we did what's called a phase 1 archaeological assessment. And he asked me to do it. I said, is this just a coincidence, or you asked me specifically? Because my great-grandfather built the building. So I was able to go down into the basement, look at the steel pilings and how my great-grandfather, Bonfa Charlie, drilled into the sandstone bedrock to create this long-lasting building.
When we started in 2003, the entire approach was, what can we do in a minimum budget, renovate it, open it? Then the community members got involved, the board grew in size, And some of the board members that were involved in the process were really visionary. They didn't want to just renovate the space and open it. They wanted to make it a state-of-art facility.
I had no idea what a theater needed to be like for people to perform here. And our stage is totally different than the stage before. And I figured that stage was fine. Wrong.
Every little bit we did, everything just was snowballing into this huge project.
That was the most amazing part for me, that how the community came together to fundraise the budget that we needed to make this project happen.
It got to be pretty expensive. And it was rather discouraging to go to the board meetings because it was always more money was needed. Get out there, Mary.
When I was involved with the Libero, the Granada began its restoration. We thought, oh man, I mean, that's a lot of money to spend. You know, I hope they can make it.
There was never a time when once we had gotten started, that we ever believed that we would fail. All we said to ourselves was, they don't know Santa Barbara.
They blew out the back wall of the stage house, took it out.
I was shocked to see inside from Anacapa Street all the way to the back of the theater. And I thought, oh my goodness, if this place ever is finished, it'll be a miracle.
And I called it in those days Sarah's hole in the ground.
Because he used to make fun. You think that's ever going to be anything more than a hole in the ground?
The original basement was underneath the stage only, but they excavated underneath the seats as well during the renovation, allowing that found space to be converted.
And now we have dressing rooms and laundry rooms and a practice room with the dance floor. And he was so excited to show people that he said, come downstairs, this didn't exist before.
It essentially made the stage space brand new and state-of-the-art. So that step was just an essential part of what makes the Granada what it is today.
So the color was always part of it. Side walls were painted black, so we did not know what the walls were. But we used the palette from the ceiling to create the palette for the walls itself. None of the stage front was visible. So the mural that you see today was not. They had covered up that mural.
I'm in awe of all the plasterwork that they did. I saw the molds that they created to make the new things, and I got to see them painting and detailing. The discovery of the bird baths, that was definitely a surprise.
We exposed these niches that were on the upper wall.
They found an outline and recreated it. Playfully, when we first opened the building, said every row is row G, because at the end of each set of seats is a G, right? And then there's these plaster Gs on the wall, and there's plaster Gs in the lobby, and there's just G's everywhere.
I remember going to Historic Landmark Commission for the entry door 16 times.
We wanted to have glass doors so people could look inside the lobby and actually look down to the stage. And the city just wasn't too, because the doors originally had been solid wood.
The doors were set back behind the kiosk about 35 feet. And this door, we were going to bring it up front.
And we made our case, and we now have glass doors.
Theater has its own acoustics, like it's designed for acoustical performance. The creative way of redesigning the acoustical side panels on the side walls, and making sure they look like they've been there forever. The proscenium screens, those are my favorite. The boxes, the way they are in the grill, it is beautiful. This is where we really, really focused on the lights. It's around those box rims to get that different color effect on the proscenium grills itself.
One of the things that I was able to see up close and personal was the painting of the chandelier, and it was a little bit like watching the Sistine Chapel being painted.
They had a scaffolding up at the upper level, right below the ceiling. With Evergreen Studios, they really did a great job of restoring that chandelier back to its original glory.
When they saw the photos of the original marquee, that really caught everybody's eye and said, we want to go back to something more like that.
By the time we finally finished getting this place completely redone, it took about 10, almost 10 years. That when we finally had our first opening, and it was so beautiful.
I came in for the grand reopening. My family came and we were honored. The contrast was incredible.
It's just so beautiful now. You look around and up and down, it's beautiful.
And I love the fact that they were able to keep so many of the original decorative elements.
I like the chandelier. Every time I look at the chandelier, I think of the story of it. And it's like, what a miracle that was preserved over all those years.
And I absolutely love the entry doors because I worked on them so hard.
Here it is, it's been, 15 years, and it looks brand new.
I think it ended up costing a lot more than people figured it would at the time, but it's well worth it.
This has been your dream come true, and it's a pretty grand dream.
The community supported it. The community put it together.
Well, people have asked me, for instance, ask us, symphony and opera, do I have to rent a tuxedo to come? No, this is Santa Barbara.
We did Carmina Burana recently, which involved not only the Santa Barbara Symphony, the entire symphony, but also the Choral Society singers. We had 100 singers, 100+ singers on stage, and then the ballet.
Perhaps a lecture one night, could have a movie another night, set up for the orchestra, have a rehearsal, and 2 days of performance.
For a city this size, to have something as professional and great as Opera Santa Barbara and our Santa Barbara Symphony.
It works for every kind of performance. I've come for stand-up comedies here. I've seen Broadway shows. I've seen ballet. I've seen symphony.
Of course, the Kismet revival that I put on for my 80th birthday.
We really liked the Broadway series.
The musicals that they are able to put on here.
We always used to come downstairs after an event and see all the different people streaming out, most of them just gabbing and happy about what they just saw. It was, I'm sure that fed his heart the most of all.
I think it is, everybody's Granada. From the legacy arts, folks who love to come listen to classical music, to the folks who come here to see a pop concert, to see the musicals, to the children who come and see school programs. It really is a wide range of people from our community.
He would be extremely proud, and you'd hear about it.
I come in just amazed at what's been done, what's going on, what is coming next.
I really see this helping our future generation be more excited about arts.
It is a place that brings together all of the performing arts.
We have resident companies here that are world-class, and that's special.
It's really a treasure to be able to have this here for 100 years and to have it coincide with my dad's birthday. That's pretty cool as well.
Oh, I'm turning 100 years old on March 19th, 2024. That's pretty old.
And we hope it'll be here another 80 years.
100.
100.
Another 100 years.
Another 100.
It's a place where people can gather, and that's important to me.
It brings people together to enjoy the arts, and it gives the artists a positive feeling too.
It's for everybody. This is Santa Barbara's Granada.
This is a place that anyone in the community, any age, is going to enjoy coming to, and there's something here for you.
You want people to have a place to enjoy art, and you want the artists to have a place to express their art.
It's our gift to Santa Barbara.
We have a beautiful place for our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren.
I just want the next generation to support it, to love it, and to enjoy it.
I hope it goes on forever.